Welcome into the video, everybody. Week 2 is already on us, so it's time to get out of that 0-1 rut, or maybe make a case to go up 2-0. That is exactly what we want to do today. In this video, I'm going to be giving you guys my starts and sits of the week. So if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, go ahead and do that because you've already found the video with the information, so you might as well get the rest of them too. Make sure to stick around to the end of the video to get my risk it for the biscuit play of the week. I'll give you guys more information on that later, but you guys know I do not like to waste anybody's time in these videos. So the very first player you need to be starting this week is James Cook, and there's a very good reasoning for this. If we go ahead and look at last week, it showed great signs for him. There was 15 carries in the backfield in total, and he got 12 of them. That's a really good split, and I kind of treated this game like a pace setter to see how much they're really going to use him. Is he going to be a goal line guy? Is Damien Harris going to be involved? And the answer is no. Damien Harris really wasn't involved. He also gets a great matchup against the Raiders, who allow the 11th most fantasy points to opposing running backs, and he'll dominate in the receiving game, which is going to give him a pretty good floor already. And speaking of his receptions, the Raiders defense allows the 4th most receiving yards and receptions out of the backfield for opposing running backs. Again, this is a really good scheme that matches up very well with James Cook. I do like starting him this week. But quickly moving on to the next guy I want to start, that is Tyler Allgeier, and I'm pretty surprised that we can start him for the second week in a row without any worries. If we look at this matchup for him, the Falcons are playing the Packers, which is going to be a very low scoring, run heavy, slow game. Both of these teams really like to play it slow. They both had one of the least amount of snaps last week, so you can put that together. That means a pretty good game script for Bijan and Tyler Allgeier. And if the Falcons just so happen to go up in this game at all, you can bet that they're going to be using Allgeier and Bijan a lot. Speaking of Bijan, Allgeier is not getting phased out at all. We wanted to see how week 1 would go, and they have a pretty decent split, and until I see Allgeier's snaps and usage going down, I'm not taking him out of my starting lineup. We're going to ride this wave as long as we can. The Falcons have a great O-line. He's not showing any signs of regression or the coaching staff phasing him out of this offense. And he's getting a decent amount of the goal line work and receptions. Is that going to change later in the season? Most definitely. But as long as he is viable and startable, which he is in this great matchup, I'm starting him where I can. And the next surefire start I'm going to cover for like 2 seconds in this video is T. Higgins. There's absolutely no way you should be sitting him. I mean, he's not even a flex option. Most likely he's a top 2 wide receiver on your team, and you should not question starting him this week. Last week, I know the Bengals and Joe Burrow looked absolutely terrible, but Joe Burrow was missing some time over training camp. They have a great matchup against the Ravens here. They're going to be going back and forth, a lot of passing and opportunities in that offense for him. Do not second guess this option. The Ravens are also without Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Williams, so that's just going to weaken up this defense even more. T. Higgins is going to eat. Do not worry about him. Now that PSA is over, I'm going to go into another group of starts, and that is one of the Seahawks wide receivers, and I have a very good feeling about this one. I could just tell you guys start DK. It's going to be DK that's going to pop off, but everybody's starting DK anyways. So my bet here is going to be Tyler Lockett. This one is a little bit sneaky because he only scored 3 points last week. He missed a little bit of the game with a concussion protocol injury issue. He came back, everything's good. He's playing in full this week. I expect a really big bounce back game for him and the whole offense specifically. Geno Smith only had 150 passing yards. That is not going to happen every single week. It's going to be a lot more than that when you have weapons like this. They do face a decently good Lions defense, but not one that they can't produce with. He's already projected 5 receptions and 60 yards, and this is just a great environment, a high-scoring, offensive-minded game. One of these receivers is going to pop off, and I have a bet it might be Tyler Lockett this week. But looking more into the in-depth starts that I actually have stats and stuff behind, we are going with Mike Williams. Again, he missed some time in his last week 1 game for medical reasons, but he's back fully healthy again. Last week, the Chargers tried to absolutely force the run game on the Dolphins. That is not going to happen this week. They're going to pass a lot more than they did. But this week, the Chargers get a great matchup against the Tennessee Titans defense, who ranked 29th in opponent wide receiver yards allowed, and they are even worse over the top, and that is exactly where Mike Williams gets his work. Last week, this defense got absolutely torched by Rashid Shaheed. He got 90 yards. He is their field stretch guy, and that is exactly what Mike Williams is to this offense. His scheme, his opportunities match perfectly with this defense's weaknesses. And you and me can both agree that Mike Williams is a decent amount better than Rashid Shaheed is. This matchup is great for him, especially if the Chargers are playing with no Austin Eckler. They have no choice but to accentuate this pass game, and it looks like Austin Eckler isn't going to play. So that is going to make this an even better start for me. But looking at our next guy that we have to be starting this week very quickly is A.J. Dillon, and this is especially if Aaron Jones does miss this game. If Aaron Jones plays in full, I probably wouldn't lean to starting A.J. Dillon, but I mean, this is a great matchup if A.J. Dillon was the prime running back. Packers are going into a slugfest of a game with the Atlanta Falcons. This is going to be an extremely run-heavy game. Both teams really like to take it slow and run like I was talking about earlier. And if A.J. Dillon's the only running back, he's going to get the third down snaps. He's going to get the receiving work. He's going to get the goal line work in an offense that didn't look too bad last week. So I really do like starting A.J. Dillon here. Even with Aaron Jones playing last week, they split the backfield 50-50, which they do every week. But he still saw 15 carries. So now with no Aaron Jones, potentially, that could be even more. You can also throw in the fact that when Aaron Jones does miss, Patrick Taylor, their third starting running back, doesn't really get involved much. It's not going to be a 1A, 1B like Dillon and Jones are. It's just going to be A.J. Dillon. We also have to mention the fact that Christian Watson could also be missing this game, and that would just lead to a run-heavy script even more. So if those two guys don't play, he's a smash play for the week. Love starting him if those guys do miss. Now it's time for the highly anticipated risk it for the biscuit play of the video. That is going to be Rachaad White. Now, if you guys don't know what the risk it for the biscuit play is, it's just a player that's a little bit more risky. It's not going to be a T. Higgins, a Mike Williams that most people are going to be starting anyways. It's going to be some guy down the rankings a little bit that's kind of a dark horse you could be starting, but also carries his own amount of risk. But if he does boom, we called it here first. And if you need a boost on your team, you're projected to lose by like 20-30 points, 30% chance of winning, he's the guy that you could be starting for that little bit of burst. Last week, our week 1 play was Alexander Madison. He met his projection pretty much exactly. So our scorecard of this is 0-0-1. We just got 1 tie. But going back to why Rachaad White is our risk it for the biscuit play of the week is because the Bears rank bottom 5 in opponent running back points allowed and yards allowed. And we do have to notice that Rachaad White was pretty bad in week 1. But we also have to notice that he was the absolute workhorse in this backfield. His usage was absolutely miles above Sean Tucker, the backup running back here. I mean, Sean Tucker might get a little bit of work later down the line in the season, but again, as of right now, that is not going to be a threat for Rachaad White. White played 80% of the snaps last week and got every single receiving down, as well as 17 rushing attempts. So he's got a great matchup in a game that doesn't really have the best offenses. But with that being said, the Buccaneers were able to close out the Vikings, so if they can be up in this game, that's even more work for Rachaad White, and the Bears didn't look too good either. The Bears also rank 8th in opponent yards per catch out of the backfield for running backs, which is just another really good scheme for Rachaad White. He's getting involved in the receiving game. He's getting all of the rushes. He really just looked like a workhorse. I was not expecting it, but that is going to continue in week 2. This could be a spot where Rachaad White continues to explode if he sees this level of usage. So here's the risk it for the biscuit play of the week. But moving on to the second half of the video, this is the must-sits players you got to be sitting this week. And the very first, I guess, group of players I want to be sitting here is every single Rams player. And don't overthink this one. This one should be pretty obvious, though. The Rams are getting an excruciating matchup against the 49ers, who are pretty much the toughest defense in every single metric for fantasy football. It's not good for the backfield because Cam Akers is already really inefficient. We don't know how it's going to be split. Maybe they use Kyren Williams more in the receiving game. He did run 80% of the routes out of this backfield. Cam Akers was not involved in the receiving game, so maybe he gets worked that way. But also maybe they just can't move the ball, or they use Cam Akers a little bit. We don't know. We really have no idea. And I'm sure there's way better players on your bench that you can be starting with a higher floor and higher ceiling this week. The Rams are likely going to have to run a pass-heavy script because they need to be playing catch-up in this game against the 49ers. So this isn't a great script for the running backs. But looking at the wide receivers, again, there's just better players on your team that you could be starting over these guys. You don't need a hit-or-miss player like Tutu Atwell. Puka and Tyler Higbee, maybe I can get away with starting, but the rest are absolute sits. But this is just a matchup in total I do not want to be targeting at all. The next must-sit player we have to absolutely shun from our starting roster is Kendrick Bourne. This one might be controversial for the people that just picked him up off waivers, but let me explain why this week is not the week to start him. 11 targets last game, 2 touchdowns. He's projected 4 receptions for 40 yards against the Dolphins in this week's matchup. And if there's no touchdown and then we're going off just those projections, that's 8 points. Despite him looking absolutely amazing last week, can we trust him to do it again? My short answer for that is obviously no. Let me explain why. A lot of the reasoning is that Mac Jones passed 54 times last week. That is something that is never going to happen for this Patriots offense again. It already is very rare for them. Mac Jones is projected for that number to be cut in half at 30. That level of pass volume is just not consistent for this offense. It's not going to be that high. It's not their identity, but I want to see how this offense operates and how Kendrick Bourne is going to operate when there's only 30 pass attempts in this offense every single week. Bourne has had spikes in the past where he goes off, but that's never really made him startable or even considerable. So I'm taking this game as a temperature check. Can they trust him for 2 weeks in a row? If they can, maybe I'll consider starting him, but there's no reason to put someone this risky in your starting lineup if you need a win this week. He could easily come out of this contest with 2 targets and a couple fantasy points. Kendrick Bourne is a boomer bust guy for me this week, but let's just see how this offense operates on a normal passing volume number. But another guy I'm not too comfortable starting this week is Drake London. I know this is going to be a flex play for a lot of you guys, but this is not the matchup to be targeting him. Obviously, he had the stinker last week, 0 fantasy points. He was an absolute waste of space on your roster. I do think he'll have a decent comeback game. Those kind of adjustments are typically made weeks after players get really bad games like this. But this is just not the matchup we want to be targeting him in. There is still general potential for him. He did run 90% of the routes. So the Falcons get an awful matchup against the Green Bay Packers. Drake London is going to be lining up with Jair Alexander, and if he can lock up Justin Jefferson, I don't want to know what he's going to do to Drake London. Like I talked about earlier, it's already going to be a really slow-paced game. There's not going to be a whole lot of offense. In the receiving game, at least, Drake London's projected 170 passing yards on the day. That is just not enough volume for him to be startable unless he maybe gets a touchdown. But again, there's better guys on your team that you should be starting with better upside. So because of the lack of offensive opportunities, I'm really staying away from a lot of guys in this game. This game is projected one of the lowest scoring totals of the week. And if Desmond Ridder's only passing 170 yards for this game, a lot of that's already going to go to the running backs out of the backfield. The running backs are going to be the focus. I don't want to trust it. The next group of sits in this video is going to be the Ravens backfield. I've talked about them a little bit in previous videos this week, so I'm going to cover it pretty quickly. They're not a backfield to buy into. Similar to the Kendrick Bourne situation, this game is a pace setter. I want to see how this offense operates in the backfield when there's no J.K. Dobbins. It's going to be a committee just like it always has been when there's no J.K. Dobbins. Justice Hill or Gus Edwards might fall into the end zone and save their week. This is not the week to take a blind risk and throw them into your lineup until we see how this backfield is split. But that is going to finish off this video of the must starts and sits of the week. If you guys did enjoy it, I seriously do appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Best bets coming soon.